You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. I mentioned that I've gotten a lot of questions about special teams. And I am right there with you, by the way. This was Jim Allen said, Matt, can you please discuss the special teams deficiencies? Yes, I would love to discuss special teams deficiencies because this is a topic we've been able to discuss literally every single game so far that LSU has played because LSU special teams have been a disaster. And the odd part about it is it's not just one thing. What I mean is 2017, LSU had Connor Culp and Jack Gonsolin as their place kickers. And both those young guys struggled. They struggled a lot that year. And ultimately, Greg McMahon went and found Cole Tracy, who was awesome. In 2018, he was an All-American. He was awesome. And he found Cade York and recruited him, developed him, and then became the best kicker in school history. They were able to solve the issue that they had by recruiting better talent and fixing it. This isn't a recruit better talent and fix it type deal. This is every phase of special teams has failed you at varying times. Muffing punts, muffing kickoffs, kicking the ball out of bounds on kickoffs, not covering kickoffs, not covering punts, muffing punts, missing field goals, having PATs blocked. It's literally everything. I mean, knock on wood, but I think the only thing that hasn't happened yet is an errant snap. So, tip of the cap to Slade Roy so far. Correct me if I'm wrong. Guys, can you think of one? I don't think there's been one. Punts, field goal, PAT. I don't think there's been an errant snap. So I don't want to speak that into existence, but that's been about the only thing so far that's been really flawless. So if you're sitting here today bemoaning special teams, you are right to bemoan special teams. They've been awful. And Brian Polian is your special teams coordinator. And so, yes, when something goes wrong in every phase of special teams in every game, your special teams coordinator deserves the lion's share of the blame for that. Is it Brian Polian's fault that Jack Bech couldn't handle the opening kickoff? No. But when you're kicking into a wind and it's a sky kick, you need to have a plan for that, and they didn't. Man. Anyway, I have more to say. But Brian Kelly was asked about it today. He was asked, how do you fix special teams? And here's what he said.
The areas that are pretty clear, you watch the game, right? I mean, we got to field the football and we got to tackle in space. Those are, clearly areas that we have to be able to, get guys to perform at that level. And so do we need to spend more time individually on things? Do we need to demand more from the individuals that are actually out there? There isn't like a whole group of other guys that are ready to play. I mean, we're playing front line. We got our starting linebackers on our punt routine, and we've got one of our best receivers returning, kickoff. So it's not like, we've got the JV team out there. These are our best guys, and we just have to stick with it and work at getting better.
So, on one hand, I completely understand what he's saying. There is a degree of frustration associated with Malik Neighbors muffed 2 punts, Jack Bech muffed a kickoff. Those are 2 of your best players. I get it. When Gregory Clayton muffs one, I understand why he's not going to be back there anymore. And I don't mean any disrespect to him at all, but there's just a difference between a guy who's at UTSA who's walking on and trying to fill a role and those 2 guys who are future NFL players who are among your best players on your team. And I think we can all agree there's a very clear delineation there. But those aren't outliers, and that's the problem. Last week, against Auburn, in the first half, you had 4 special teams penalties. In the first half, almost every single special teams play, you committed a penalty. So it's not like it's, well, one of your best players muffed a kick. Like, sometimes physical mistakes happen in games, in every sport. And you can kind of live with that. What you can't live with are all of the mistakes that continue to happen, the mental mistakes. Go back to the opener. I mean, this coaching staff is the one that put Mason Taylor as the left wing when the kid acknowledged he'd never been on a field goal PAT unit in his life. Why? A week later, Jack Mashburn was there. Good, they fixed it. But that should never have been a problem that you had to fix. The coverage units. I mean, you've got, I don't know what the exact number is right now, but I think it's in the number of 75 scholarship players on your roster. You can find disciplined guys that have played special teams their whole life that know how to stay in a lane, shed a block, and make a tackle. It shouldn't be a bad thing when your punter booms a 60-yarder because he outkicked his coverage. Like, get your ass down there and cover the kick. I mean, these are the things that if LSU were a dominant football team, these are things we'd almost forget about because they'd win and you'd forget about this little thing. But when you are what you are today, booming a punt and allowing a 58-yard return is a massive deal because 2 special teams plays at the onset of the game spotted them 10 points, essentially. And against that team, you just can't do it. So, listen, when Brian Kelly was hired and he hired the whole staff, when he finished his staff, remember T-Bob and I did this on an episode of Scone and Tea. It's a podcast T-Bob and I do every Wednesday if you're not familiar. We do it live at Oliver Twist. We welcome you. Come join us 7 o'clock. And we looked at the outgoing staff and Brian Kelly's incoming staff, and we went position by position, staff member by staff member, said, okay, is it an upgrade or a downgrade? And there were only 2 positions where we kind of agreed mutually that it was a downgrade from what you had a year ago. One was DB coach, where you had Corey Raymond, godfather of DBU, and it's not a knock on Kerry Cooks, who by all accounts is a very accomplished defensive backs coach. But Corey Raymond, his resume is what it is. I don't need to explain it. And then special teams. You went from Greg McMahon to Brian Polian. And Greg McMahon, I would argue, was Ed Ogeron's best hire. I mean, I don't need to go too deeply into that. We can have that conversation another day, and I can sort of explain why. But I would argue that that's the best hire from an outsider that he brought in that Ed Ogeron made during his time in Baton Rouge. Again, we can have that conversation. People say Joe Brady. There's a lot of conversation we could have, but anyway. Sometimes guys are hired on staff to fill a certain role, like a recruiting role. He's also your recruiting coordinator. Sometimes guys are hired as recruiters and they're sort of stashed on staff to coach a position. When Mickey Joseph was hired at LSU as the receivers coach, Mickey Joseph had never coached receivers. He was hired because you had to have connectivity to New Orleans. You had to have, from Frank Wilson to Jabbar Jalouk to Mickey Joseph, to now Cortez Hankton and Frank Wilson, again, you have to have that. But Mickey Joseph had never coached receivers. Now, to his credit, he worked his behind off and learned under, glad Terrier's not here, Jerry Sullivan, who they hired as an analyst to help Mickey coach the receivers. But Mickey was on staff to recruit. Now look, he's the interim head coach at Nebraska. I hope he gets that job. Wish him all the success. He's a really good coach. But it was a position group he hadn't coached before. That happens sometimes, where you try to stash a recruiter on staff. I don't know if that's what they're doing with Brian Polian. I can't sit here and tell you that. I mean, I could read a bio, but I can't sit here and tell you I know definitively Brian Polian's deep, long history. Everybody knows his dad was a NFL, he was a Pro Football Hall of Famer, because he was the architect of those Colts teams with Peyton Manning and everything. Now, Brian Polian has coached special teams before. He coached special teams at Buffalo in 01, 03, and he coached special teams under Brian Kelly from 2005 to 2009 at Notre Dame, then at Stanford in 10 and 11, and Texas A&M in 12. So, I mean, he's coached special teams a bunch of places, but you wouldn't know it looking at the performance of this team right now. So, man, it's hard to point the finger anywhere else when it is an all-encompassing failure with a phase of the game, which is a third of the game. So, y'all know me, man. I've never been fire the coach guy, and I'm not going to sit here and yell that they need to fire Brian Polian. But if in the second half of the season, special teams mirrors the first half, I don't know how you justify bringing him back. There's just too much on the line to continue and consistently have this many massive mistakes in that phase of the game over and over and over again. Hopefully they get it figured out. Hopefully they keep getting better and better as the season goes along here in the second half, because they're going to need to be with what you have ahead. A trip to Florida, home against top 10 Ole Miss, Alabama, road trips to Arkansas and Texas A&M. You better not be giving them points, because some of those are winnable games. But you're not good enough to just give teams points. And LSU's been doing that all season in special teams. We need to fix it in a hurry. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.